The thunderous crack of a rifle split the evening air as Rebecca Green felt the wagon lurch beneath her feet. The wolves that had been circling her broken-down wagon for the past half-hour scattered momentarily, their yellow eyes gleaming with hunger in the fading light of dusk. Another shot rang out, and a deep voice called from the ridge above, "You're all right now, madam." Rebecca clutched her shawl tighter around her shoulders as a tall figure on horseback emerged from the gathering darkness of the Montana wilderness. The year 1875, bringing both new beginnings and unexpected dangers to those brave enough to seek them. Rebecca had left Philadelphia 3 weeks ago, her heart full of determination and her wagon packed with everything she owned. At 23, she had abandoned the comfortable life her parents had built to pursue her dream of opening a schoolhouse in the growing settlement of Timber Creek. The death of her fiancé 2 years prior had left her with nothing but painful memories in the East, and the advertisement seeking a teacher in Montana territory had seemed like divine providence. "Miss, you hurt." The rider approached cautiously, his Winchester rifle balanced across his saddle. In the dimming light, Rebecca could make out a weathered face beneath the wide brim of his hat, sharp blue eyes assessing her situation with practiced efficiency. "No, sir, just frightened," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "My wheel broke about an hour ago, and then those creatures appeared." The man dismounted with fluid grace, tethering his horse before approaching. "Name's Frederick Lawson. Most folks call me Fred." He touched the brim of his hat in greeting. "Those timber wolves are getting bolder as winter approaches. You're lucky I was riding this trail today." Rebecca smoothed her travel-worn skirt, suddenly aware of her disheveled appearance after days on the trail. "Rebecca Green, I'm traveling to Timber Creek to take a teaching position." Fred Lawson whistled low. "That's another day's journey, Miss Green, and not one you ought to make alone, especially with wolves about." He examined the broken wheel with a critical eye. "This axle's split clean through, no fixing it here." The realization that she was stranded in wolf territory as night fell sent a cold shiver down Rebecca's spine. "What should I do? My ranch is about 3 miles back. We can transfer your necessities to my horse, and I'll come back tomorrow with the proper tools to fix your wagon." His tone was matter-of-fact, but his eyes were kind. Rebecca hesitated. Back east, accepting a stranger's invitation would be unthinkable, but the West had different rules. The distant howl of a wolf made her decision easier. "Thank you, Mr. Lawson. Your help is most appreciated." As they loaded her most valuable possessions onto Fred's patient horse, Rebecca couldn't help but notice the efficient way he moved, the quiet confidence in his actions. He was perhaps 30 years old, his frame lean and hardened by frontier life, but there was a gentleness in how he handled her belongings. "Been teaching long?" he asked as they began walking, leading the horse between them. 5 years in Philadelphia. This will be my first position out west." "Timber Creek needs a good teacher. The town's growing fast since the silver strike last year." He paused, helping her over a fallen log. "What brings you all the way from Philadelphia alone?" Rebecca stared at the darkening trail ahead. "There was nothing left for me there." Fred nodded, understanding the weight of unspoken words. The West is good for new beginnings. The Lawson Ranch appeared as they crested a small rise, a sturdy 2-story cabin with a barn and corrals spread across a clearing backed by pine forest. Lamplight glowed from the windows and smoke curled from the stone chimney, promising warmth against the autumn chill. "It's not much," Fred said, "but it's home." A young man emerged from the barn as they approached. "Fred was wondering when you'd get back, heard shots." His curious gaze fell on Rebecca. "Riley, this is Miss Green," Fred explained. "She's had trouble with her wagon. Miss Green, my younger brother Riley." Riley Lawson tipped his hat, his smile revealing a familial resemblance to Fred despite his more boyish features. At perhaps 20, he had the same blue eyes but lacked the weathered lines that marked his brother's face. "Pleasure to meet you, Miss Green. Any friend of Fred's is welcome here." "Riley, take care of Storm while I show Miss Green inside," Fred instructed, helping Rebecca down from the horse. The cabin interior was surprisingly comfortable, simple furnishings, but clean and well-maintained. A woman in her 60s stood by the hearth, stirring something that filled the room with savory aromas. "Mrs. Peterson," Fred called, "we have a guest tonight." The older woman turned, her weathered face breaking into a welcoming smile. "Well now, it's about time this house saw a young lady." She wiped her hands on her apron. "Martha Peterson, housekeeper for these Lawson boys since they were knee-high to grasshoppers." Rebecca felt herself relaxing for the first time in days. "Rebecca Green, I'm most grateful for your hospitality." "Wolves had her surrounded," Fred explained, hanging his hat on a peg by the door. "Wheel broke on her wagon about 6 miles east of here." "Merciful heavens," Martha exclaimed. "You poor dear. Let's get you settled and fed. You look about done in." Over a hearty meal of venison stew and fresh bread, Rebecca learned more about the Lawson brothers. Their parents had established the ranch 15 years earlier, but both had succumbed to influenza 4 winters past. Fred had taken over operations, while Riley split his time between ranching and working as a deputy in Timber Creek. "The ranch keeps us busy," Fred explained, "but we're doing all right. 50 head of cattle and some of the finest quarter horses in the territory." "Fred's being modest," Riley interjected. "His horses are sought after all the way to Cheyenne. He's got away with them like nobody I've ever seen." Fred dismissed the praise with a wave. "Tomorrow I'll head back to your wagon. The wolves might have scattered your things, but we'll salvage what we can." "I can't thank you enough," Rebecca said. "I'd begun to fear I'd made a terrible mistake coming west alone." "It takes courage," Fred replied, his eyes meeting hers across the table. "But folks look out for each other here. It's the only way to survive." Later, settled in a small but comfortable bedroom that Martha explained had belonged to the Lawson's sister before she married and moved to Oregon, Rebecca sat on the edge of the bed, reflecting on her unexpected turn of fortune. The howl of wolves sounded in the distance, but instead of fear, she felt an odd sense of gratitude for their presence. Had they not surrounded her wagon, she might never have met Frederick Lawson, a man whose quiet strength had made her feel safer than she had in years. Morning brought a flurry of activity as Fred prepared to retrieve Rebecca's wagon. She insisted on accompanying him, unwilling to simply wait while a stranger handled her possessions. "It might not be safe," Fred cautioned as they ate breakfast. "Those wolves could still be about." "I've come 3,000 miles alone, Mr. Lawson," Rebecca replied. "I believe I can manage a 6-mile journey with an armed escort." A hint of admiration flickered in his eyes. "Very well, Miss Green, but stay close." They set out with tools loaded in Fred's wagon, Riley accompanying them as additional protection. The autumn morning was crisp and clear, the Montana wilderness stretching before them in breathtaking beauty that made Rebecca forget her troubles momentarily. "It's magnificent," she breathed, taking in the mountains rising in the distance, their peaks already dusted with early snow. "It gets in your blood," Fred said quietly. "My father used to say that once you've seen a Montana sunrise, no other place quite feels like home." They found Rebecca's wagon largely untouched, though wolf tracks circled it extensively. Working together, the men replaced the broken axle while Rebecca gathered her scattered belongings. By noon, both wagons were ready to travel. "I'll escort you to Timber Creek," Fred announced, securing the last of her possessions. "Riley can take our wagon back to the ranch." Rebecca started to protest, but Fred's expression brooked no argument. "Wolves aren't the only danger out here, Miss Green. There's no sense taking unnecessary risks when I'm headed that direction anyway." The journey to Timber Creek took them through changing terrain, pine forests giving way to open meadows, then rolling hills as they neared the settlement. Fred rode alongside Rebecca's wagon, occasionally pointing out landmarks or sharing stories about the area. His knowledge of the territory was extensive, and Rebecca found herself captivated by both his tales and the easy way he told them. "How did you learn so much about this land?" she asked as they paused to rest the horses. "Spent a lot of time with the Blackfoot when I was younger. My father believed in maintaining good relations with them." Fred's expression grew thoughtful. "They understand this land better than any of us ever will. Respect it, too, in ways most settlers don't. The newspapers back east portray them as savages," Rebecca ventured carefully. Fred's jaw tightened. Newspapers tell the stories people want to hear, not always the truth. I've known good and bad among all kinds of folk. The Blackfoot I knew taught me how to track, how to read the weather, how to survive when others couldn't. His willingness to speak candidly about such matters impressed Rebecca. Most men of her acquaintance in Philadelphia would have dismissed her interest in such topics as inappropriate for a lady's consideration. As afternoon waned, the outskirts of Timber Creek appeared a collection of wooden structures spread along a main street, with smaller homesteads dotting the surrounding hillsides. Compared to Philadelphia, it was hardly more than a village, but to Rebecca, it represented the future she had chosen. The schoolhouse is at the north end of town, Fred explained as they approached. The teachers' quarters are attached to the rear. Rebecca felt a flutter of nervousness. I hope I haven't missed the start of term. School doesn't begin for another week. Mayor Thompson was quite concerned they wouldn't find a teacher in time. They drew curious glances as they traveled down the main street, Fred acknowledging greetings with a nod or touch of his hat. Rebecca understood that in a town this size, a new arrival, particularly a single woman, would be the subject of considerable interest. The schoolhouse was larger than she had expected, a rectangular building with tall windows and a small bell tower. Behind it stood a modest cabin that would serve as her home. It's perfect, she whispered as Fred helped her down from the wagon. A portly man in a tailored suit hurried across from the general store. Mr. Lawson, I see you've brought our new school teacher. He extended a hand to Rebecca. Mayor Ezekiel Thompson, Miss Green, we're delighted you've arrived safely. Thank you, Mayor Thompson. I'm eager to begin my duties. Fred, my boy, the mayor continued, how did you come to escort Miss Green? Found her wagon broken down with wolves circling, Fred explained. Seemed the neighborly thing to do. The mayor's eyebrows shot up. Wolves? My dear Miss Green, how terrifying for you. Mr. Lawson fired twice and assured me I was all right, Rebecca said with a smile toward Fred, and he proved entirely correct. After helping Rebecca unload her belongings and ensuring the teacher's cabin was in habitable condition, Fred prepared to depart. Standing beside his wagon as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, he seemed reluctant to leave. Will you be all right here alone? He asked. I believe so, Rebecca replied, though the prospect of her first night in a strange town was somewhat daunting. I come to Timber Creek every Saturday for supplies, he said, adjusting his horse's harness unnecessarily. Perhaps I could call on you to ensure you're settling in properly. Rebecca felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. I would like that very much, Mr. Lawson. Fred, he corrected gently. If you're going to be part of our community, there's no need for such formality. Fred, she repeated, liking the way it felt on her lips. And you must call me Rebecca. With a tip of his hat and a smile that transformed his weathered face, Fred Lawson departed, leaving Rebecca to wonder at the strange turns of fate that had brought her to this moment. The following days passed in a whirlwind of preparation. Rebecca arranged her classroom, met with parents, and began to learn the rhythms of her new community. Timber Creek proved to be a welcoming place, with families eager to introduce themselves and offer assistance to the new teacher. Saturday arrived with clear skies and a flutter of anticipation in Rebecca's stomach that she tried to dismiss as merely excitement about receiving additional supplies from the general store. When she spotted Fred's wagon coming down the main street, however, she had to acknowledge the truth. She had been waiting for his return. Fred found her at the schoolhouse, organizing books that had been donated by various families. He stood in the doorway for a moment, hat in hand, taking in the transformation of the previously empty room. You've been busy, he observed with appreciation. Rebecca turned, unable to suppress her smile. There's much to do before classes begin on Monday. I brought you something. Fred reached into his pocket and produced a small package wrapped in brown paper. A welcome gift. Inside was a beautifully crafted wooden pencil case with wildflowers carved into the lid. It's lovely, Rebecca breathed, running her fingers over the intricate design. Riley's work. He has a talent for wood carving. Fred's eyes crinkled at the corners. But I told him what to make. That first visit established a pattern. Each Saturday, Fred would arrive in town, complete his business, then spend time with Rebecca. Sometimes they shared a meal at the town's small restaurant. Other times they simply walked, talking about their respective weeks and growing more comfortable in each other's company. As autumn deepened toward winter, Rebecca found herself looking forward to Saturdays with increasing eagerness. Fred was unlike any man she had known, straightforward yet thoughtful, strong but gentle in his interactions with her and others. He listened when she spoke of her ideas for education, offering perspectives she hadn't considered without dismissing her views as many men might have done. Winter arrived with a vengeance in early December. Rebecca awoke one Monday to find snow piled against her door and more falling heavily. She managed to reach the schoolhouse, but only 3 students had braved the weather. By noon, the storm had intensified, and Rebecca made the decision to send the children home while they could still safely travel. She had just closed the schoolhouse when she heard the sound of an approaching wagon. Through the curtain of snow, she recognized Fred's tall figure driving the team with determined precision. "Fred," she called in surprise. "What are you doing in town?" He pulled the horses to a stop, his face grim beneath his snow-dusted hat. "Storm's worse than expected." Riley rode out to warn the outlying farms. "I came for you." "For me? This isn't a normal snowfall, Rebecca. It's a full blizzard moving in, and your cabin won't be safe. The roof hasn't been properly reinforced for heavy snow." The seriousness in his voice convinced her. "What should I do?" "Come to the ranch. It's sturdy and we have plenty of supplies to wait out the storm." He extended his hand. "Please, I'd never forgive myself if something happened to you." The intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. Without further hesitation, she gathered what she needed from her cabin and joined him in the wagon. The journey back to the Lawson ranch was harrowing, with visibility reduced to mere feet and the cold biting through layers of clothing despite the blankets Fred had brought. When they finally reached the ranch, Martha Peterson welcomed Rebecca with open arms and hot coffee. "Knew Fred would bring you," the older woman said with a knowing look. "He's been fretting about that schoolhouse roof since September." The blizzard raged for 3 days, during which Rebecca found herself embraced by the warmth of ranch life. She helped Martha with cooking and mending, played chess with Riley in the evenings, and spent countless hours in conversation with Fred beside the hearth fire. Cut off from the world by walls of snow, they shared stories of their pasts, Fred's adventures as a young man, Rebecca's life in Philadelphia, and the heartbreak of losing her fiancé to typhoid fever. "I thought I would never recover," she admitted quietly one night as they sat alone by the dying embers, the house silent around them. "James and I had been intended for each other since childhood. When he died, it felt as though my future died with him." Fred's hand found hers in the firelight. "And now," Rebecca met his gaze, recognizing the question beneath his words. "Now I'm beginning to believe in new futures." The touch of his fingers against hers sent warmth spreading through her body that had nothing to do with the fire. For a moment, Rebecca thought he might kiss her, but a log shifted in the fireplace, breaking the spell between them. When the storm finally passed, Fred insisted on escorting Rebecca back to town. The landscape had been transformed, with snowdrifts taller than a man in places. They found Timber Creek digging itself out, the community working together to clear paths and check on neighbors. "School will be delayed another week at least," the mayor informed them when they arrived. "Some of the farm families are still snowed in." The unexpected free time allowed Rebecca to assist with community recovery efforts and spend more time with Fred, who remained in town to help with repairs to buildings damaged by the heavy snow. Working side by side, distributing supplies and clearing paths, they fell into an easy partnership that drew knowing glances from townspeople. "Folks are talking," Riley mentioned casually to Rebecca one afternoon as they sorted donations at the church. "About you and Fred." Rebecca felt heat rise to her cheeks. "There's nothing improper in our friendship." "Never said there was." Riley's eyes twinkled mischievously. "But I haven't seen my brother smile this much since before our parents died. Whatever you're doing, please keep doing it." As winter settled into a rhythm of clear days and frigid nights, Fred began calling on Rebecca more frequently. Their Saturday visits expanded to include Wednesday evenings, when he would bring books borrowed from friends or special treats from Martha's kitchen. Sometimes they would simply sit in companionable silence, Rebecca grading papers while Fred whittled or sketched designs for new structures on the ranch. On a particularly cold January evening, Fred arrived with news. "The Founders' Day dance is 3 weeks from Saturday," he said without preamble as Rebecca welcomed him into her cabin. "I was wondering if you would attend with me." The formal invitation, their first public acknowledgement of a courtship, made Rebecca's heart race. "I would be honored," she replied, unable to keep the pleasure from her voice. The dance became the talk of the town as preparations commenced. For a community that endured long, isolated winters, such social gatherings were precious opportunities for connection and celebration. Rebecca found herself swept up in the excitement, working with other women to decorate the town hall and prepare refreshments. "You'll need a new dress," declared Harriet Wilson, the dressmaker's wife, during one planning session. "Every unmarried man in 3 counties will be watching you." "I'm only interested in the attention of one particular man," Rebecca admitted, surprising herself with her candor. Harriet smiled knowingly. "Frederick Lawson is a good man, stubborn as the day is long but good-hearted. Half the unmarried women in the territory have set their caps for him over the years. And why has he remained single?" Rebecca couldn't help asking. "Some say he was waiting for the right woman," Harriet replied with a significant look. "Others think he was too dedicated to making the ranch successful after his parents died. Either way, I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." The night of the dance arrived clear and cold, with stars brilliant against the black velvet sky. Fred appeared at Rebecca's door in his finest clothes, not formal attire by Eastern standards, but a clean suit carefully pressed, with a new shirt and polished boots that spoke of special effort. "You look beautiful," he said when Rebecca emerged in her new dress of deep blue wool, her hair arranged in an elegant knot at the nape of her neck. "And you are very handsome," she replied, noting how the suit emphasized the breadth of his shoulders and the blue of his eyes. The town hall had been transformed with pine boughs, ribbon, and lanterns that cast a golden glow over the proceedings. A small orchestra consisting of local musicians played lively tunes as couples circled the floor. Rebecca felt every eye upon them as Fred led her into the hall, his hand warm and steady at the small of her back. "Miss Green, you've certainly brought spring to our winter," Mayor Thompson greeted them. "And Fred, you old fox, keeping our lovely teacher all to yourself." They danced every set together, moving with surprising grace given Fred's usual reticence toward such activities. During a particularly lively reel, Rebecca caught a glimpse of his face relaxed and joyful in a way she had rarely seen. "You're enjoying yourself," she observed when they paused for refreshments. "I'm with you," he replied simply. "That makes any activity enjoyable." As the evening progressed, the musicians shifted to slower, more romantic melodies. Fred drew Rebecca closer during a waltz, his arms strong around her waist. "I never thought I'd find someone like you," he said quietly, his lips close to her ear. "When I saw your wagon surrounded by those wolves, I was just thinking about saving a stranger. I had no idea I was meeting the woman who would change everything." Rebecca's heart hammered against her ribs. "Everything?" He guided her toward the door, away from curious ears. Outside, in the crisp night air with their breath forming clouds between them, Fred took her hands in his. "Rebecca, I know it hasn't been very long, but I've never been more certain of anything. I love you. I think I began falling in love with you that very first day, when you insisted on coming to retrieve your wagon despite the danger." Joy bloomed within her chest, warm and expansive. "And I love you, Frederick Lawson. Your kindness, your strength, your gentle heart, you've helped me believe in happiness again." Their first kiss was tender, a gentle meeting of lips that deepened as Fred drew her into his arms. When they finally parted, his eyes were bright with emotion in the moonlight. "Will you marry me, Rebecca? Make a life with me on the ranch?" "Yes," she whispered without hesitation. "With all my heart, yes." Their engagement was announced to cheers and congratulations at the dance, the community embracing their happiness as a bright spot in the long winter. Plans were made for a spring wedding, after the worst of the season had passed, and before the busy summer months demanded Fred's full attention at the ranch. February brought new challenges when an outbreak of influenza swept through Timber Creek. Rebecca, working closely with families through the school, was among the first to fall ill. Fred, hearing of her condition, rode through a snowstorm to reach her, finding her cabin cold and Rebecca herself burning with fever. Without hesitation, he bundled her into blankets and transported her to the town doctor's home, where she could receive proper care. For 3 days and nights, he barely left her side, helping to administer medicine and cool her fevered brow. "You'll get sick too," she protested weakly during a lucid moment. "Then we'll be sick together," he replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I'm not leaving you, Rebecca." When her fever finally broke and recovery began, Fred insisted on taking her to the ranch to convalesce properly. "Martha's chicken soup has healing powers," he declared, brooking no argument. Rebecca's weeks of recovery at the ranch deepened her connection not just with Fred, but with Riley and Martha as well. She came to understand the rhythms of ranch life, the pre-dawn rising, the careful attention to animals, the constant vigilance against weather and predators. Fred included her in discussions about spring planting and breeding plans for the horses, making it clear he viewed their future as a true partnership. As winter began to loosen its grip on the land, Rebecca returned to her teaching duties with renewed energy. The school board, impressed by her dedication despite her illness, offered her a contract for the following year with increased salary. Fred, however, had other ideas. What if we built a school on ranch property? He suggested one evening as they walked along the creek that gave the town its name. Spring was beginning to stir, with the first green shoots appearing through melting snow. "There are enough children within riding distance to justify it." Rebecca stopped, staring at him. "You would do that. The nearest school is too far for many of the homesteaders' children," Fred explained. "And this way you could teach without having to choose between your calling and our life together." Tears pricked at Rebecca's eyes. "You've thought about what would make me happy." "Your happiness is my happiness now," he said simply. Their wedding took place in early April, with the landscape coming alive around them. The entire community gathered to celebrate ranchers and townspeople, students and their families, even a small delegation from the Blackfoot tribe with whom Fred had maintained friendly relations. Rebecca wore a dress of ivory silk that Martha and the town's women had helped create, with tiny wildflowers embroidered around the hem to represent her new home. Fred, standing tall and proud in a new suit, watched her walk toward him with an expression of such pure joy that it brought tears to the eyes of even the most stoic observers. They spoke their vows beneath an arch of early blooming branches outside the church, promising to love and support each other through all the challenges frontier life might bring. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Fred's kiss was both tender and possessive, a declaration to all present that they belonged to each other now and always. The celebration continued well into the night, with dancing and feasting that drew together all segments of the community. As darkness fell and lanterns illuminated the merry scene, Fred drew Rebecca away from the festivities, leading her toward a waiting wagon decorated with ribbons and flowers. "I have something to show you," he said, helping her onto the seat beside him. They traveled the now familiar road toward the ranch, but Fred turned onto a side trail Rebecca had never noticed before. After a short journey, they emerged into a clearing bathed in moonlight. There, nestled against a stand of pines, stood a new cabin smaller than the main ranch house but solidly built, with a covered porch and smoke curling invitingly from the chimney. "Our home," Fred said, watching her face carefully. "Riley and I built it over the winter whenever the weather allowed. Martha's been inside today, making sure everything is ready." Rebecca stared in wonder at the manifestation of Fred's love. "It's perfect," she whispered. He lifted her from the wagon and carried her across the threshold, setting her down in a cozy room warmed by a crackling fire. Simple but beautiful furniture filled the space: a table and chairs, a comfortable-looking sofa, shelves already lined with Rebecca's books. "The bedroom is through there," Fred indicated, suddenly seeming nervous. And there's a small room adjacent that could be, well, a nursery someday. If you want. Rebecca moved into his arms, overwhelmed by the thought he had put into creating this space for their future. I want everything with you, Fred. A home, children, a lifetime of days like today. Their first night as husband and wife was tender and passionate, both of them discovering the joy of complete union with the person they loved. As they lay together afterward, the moonlight streaming through the window illuminating their entwined figures, Rebecca thought about the strange twist of fate that had brought them together: a broken wagon, circling wolves, and 2 rifle shots that had changed the course of her life. "What are you thinking about?" Fred asked, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "About how differently things might have turned out if you hadn't been riding that trail the day my wagon broke down." He pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I believe we were meant to find each other, Rebecca. Maybe not that day or in that way, but somehow our paths would have crossed. How can you be so sure?" His smile was visible even in the dim light. "Because from the moment I saw you standing brave against those wolves, I couldn't imagine my life without you in it. Some things are just meant to be." Spring blossomed into summer, and Rebecca and Fred settled into married life with a happiness that seemed to grow with each passing day. The school on ranch property became reality, with Fred and neighboring ranchers building a simple but functional structure where Rebecca began teaching in May. Children from surrounding homesteads arrived on horseback or in wagons, eager to learn from the teacher whose kind but firm methods had earned her respect throughout the area. Life on the frontier required constant work from sunup to sundown, but they faced each challenge together. Rebecca learned to garden, preserve food, and even assist with calving, while Fred proved an eager student when she taught him more refined social graces for their occasional trips to larger settlements. Their evenings were spent in companionable activities, reading aloud to each other, planning improvements to the ranch, or simply enjoying the quiet togetherness that had become precious to them both. By late summer, Rebecca had news of her own to share. On an evening when they sat watching the sunset from their porch, she took Fred's hand and placed it gently on her stomach. "We'll need that nursery sooner than we thought," she said softly, watching his expression change from confusion to wonder to unbridled joy. "A baby." He whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You're certain?" Dr. Wilson confirmed it yesterday. "By next spring there will be 3 of us." Fred gathered her into his arms with a gentleness that belied his strength. "I never thought I could be this happy," he said against her hair. "You've given me everything I never knew I needed, Rebecca." "As you have for me," she replied. "When I left Philadelphia, I was searching for a purpose. I found that in teaching, but with you, I found a home." The news of their expected child spread quickly through the community, bringing a flood of well wishes and practical gifts from neighbors who understood the challenges of raising children on the frontier. Martha Peterson declared herself the baby's honorary grandmother, already planning the quilts she would make through the winter months. As autumn painted the landscape in brilliant hues of red and gold, Rebecca and Fred marked the anniversary of their first meeting with a picnic near the spot where her wagon had broken down. No wolves threatened them now, but Fred still carried his rifle, a necessity in territory where danger could appear without warning. "I was so frightened that day," Rebecca remembered, leaning against her husband's solid form as they shared a meal beneath a canopy of golden leaves. "When I saw those wolves circling closer, I thought my journey had been for nothing." Fred's arm tightened around her. "I still remember coming over that ridge and seeing you standing there, refusing to cower despite your fear. 2 shots to scatter those wolves, and my life was never the same." "You're all right now," Rebecca quoted with a smile. "That's what you said to me." "And were you all right?" She placed his hand over the gentle swell of her stomach, where their child grew stronger each day. "I've never been more all right in my life." Winter brought heavy snow that isolated the ranch for weeks at a time, but inside their cabin, Rebecca and Fred created a world of warmth and love. As Rebecca's pregnancy progressed, Fred became increasingly protective, insisting on handling more of her usual chores despite her protests that she wasn't an invalid. "Humor me," he would say, kissing her soundly before heading out into the snow to tend to the animals or bring in more firewood. "Let me take care of you both." During the long evenings, they planned for their child's future. Fred carved a cradle from pine wood, while Rebecca sewed tiny garments from fabric that Martha had ordered specially from Denver. They discussed names and dreamed about what their child might become in this wild land of opportunity. "Boy or girl, our child will have choices I never had," Fred said one night as they sat by the fire. "An education, opportunities to see more of the world, the chance to decide their own path. While still knowing they always have a home to return to," Rebecca added, understanding how important roots were to a man who had nearly lost everything when his parents died. Their daughter was born on a clear March day as the first signs of spring began to appear across the land. After a difficult but ultimately successful labor attended by Martha and the town midwife, Rebecca held her child for the first time, a perfect, red-faced little girl with a dusting of dark hair and eyes that would eventually reveal themselves to be as blue as her father's. Fred, who had paced anxiously outside during the birth, entered the room with reverence, his eyes filling with tears at the sight of his wife and daughter. "She's beautiful," he whispered, carefully taking the tiny bundle when Rebecca offered her. "Like her mother." They named her Elizabeth Hope Lawson Elizabeth for Rebecca's mother, and hope for the feeling that had brought them together and sustained them through every challenge. As spring advanced into summer, their daughter thrived, growing stronger each day. Rebecca resumed teaching with Elizabeth often nestled in a cradle beside her desk, the students taking turns rocking her when she fussed. Fred expanded the ranch operations, his horses gaining recognition that brought buyers from as far away as California. On a warm evening in June, they sat on their porch watching fireflies rise from the meadow grasses. Elizabeth slept peacefully in Rebecca's arms, her tiny features relaxed in innocent slumber. "I rode past the spot where we met today," Fred said, his voice thoughtful. "Remembered how close I came to taking a different trail that day." Rebecca looked up at the emerging stars, thinking about the countless decisions and circumstances that had brought them to this moment. "Perhaps it wasn't chance at all," she suggested. "Perhaps we were always meant to find each other." Fred's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining in the familiar gesture that had come to symbolize their partnership. "I like to think so. That even if I hadn't found you surrounded by wolves that day, somehow, someway, we would have found each other. And you would have told me I was all right," Rebecca added with a smile, "and I would have been right." Fred leaned forward to place a gentle kiss on her lips, then one on their daughter's forehead. "Because together, we're more than all right. We're exactly where we're supposed to be." As night settled fully over the Montana wilderness, the Lawson family remained on their porch, surrounded by the vast beauty of the land they called home. Wolves might still roam the distant ridges, and challenges would certainly lie ahead, but Rebecca knew with absolute certainty that the broken wagon that had once seemed like disaster had instead been the beginning of her greatest adventure, a love story written across the wild frontier of both the untamed West and her own heart. 5 years later, the Lawson Ranch had grown into one of the most prosperous in the territory. 2 more children had joined the family: Samuel Frederick, now 3, and 1-year-old James Riley, giving Elizabeth the role of big sister that she embraced with natural authority. The school Rebecca had established on ranch property now served 25 children and employed a second teacher, allowing Rebecca to divide her time between education and family. Fred had expanded their home to accommodate their growing family, adding rooms with large windows that looked out over the mountains they both loved. Each evening, regardless of the day's demands, they would sit together on their porch, watching their children play in the yard as the sun set behind the distant peaks. "Do you ever miss Philadelphia?" Fred asked one such evening, his arm around Rebecca's shoulders as they watched Elizabeth teaching her brothers to catch fireflies. Rebecca considered the question, thinking of the city she had left behind nearly 6 years before. "I miss certain conveniences," she admitted. "Indoor plumbing. Theater performances, bookshops on every corner. We could visit someday," Fred suggested, Show the children the world beyond Montana. Perhaps. Rebecca leaned into his embrace, but then we'd have to come home. Because that day you fired those 2 shots and told me I was all right, that was the day I started finding my way home, even though I didn't know it yet. Fred's kiss was tender, familiar yet still thrilling after years together. You were worth every wolf I've ever faced, he murmured against her lips, and I'd face 1,000 more to keep you safe. Their children's laughter rang across the yard as twilight deepened into night, a sound that echoed the joy that had grown from that first desperate meeting when her wagon was surrounded by wolves. The cowboy fired twice and said, "You're all right now." Words that had begun not just a rescue, but a love that would endure through all the seasons of their lives together in the wild Montana wilderness. They both called home.